Is here today. He is the author of The Big Hustle. Please put your hands together for Mr. Jimmy Wahlberg. What's up, guys? I can't believe I made it. Snowstorm and all. Does this work? Hello, we're back. I got to be honest with you, I was in Miami International Airport yesterday looking out the window at the sun, and I was praying, Lord, cancel this flight. I want to spend the weekend with my grandson. But the Lord had other plans. Brothers, I got to tell you that I do this a little bit. I travel around, I go to conferences. I'm thoroughly impressed with what's going on here. I'm thoroughly impressed. I'm so impressed that I've decided to give half of my testimony this year so that I can come back with Rippinger and all the guys next year and hang out with them. Yeah, you're in for it big time. All right, let's get a couple of little things out of the way before I get started. Okay, who thought Mark Wahlberg was coming? Come on, he did. Yeah, he's not coming. Chris Stefanik is here, my brother, Chris, who I love dearly, and man, he just blows the roof off the building. And I don't like going after him, I can tell you that. But he told me that if I didn't, again, remind you to text to 44144, go. Text the word go, that he was going to see me outside afterwards if I didn't do that. Chris and I are hosting a pilgrimage together to Mexico, to Our Lady of Guadalupe, and you can find all the information on that trip there, as well as Chris's new program, which he wants to give to you for free. And I endorse anything that Chris is doing because he's just an absolute, he's a warrior. And then I just want to briefly share with you that I noticed when you were showing all that you had done this year, one of the things that had been done was you showed my film, Jesus Thirst, the Miracle of the Eucharist. And that what a blessing to see that and to know that I played a little part in what's going on around here. I have another film coming out this spring. It'll be in theaters. 1,000+ theaters across the country. It's on Blessed Carlos Acutis. It's called Roadmap to Reality. I look around here and I see so many young men. I won't call them boys, I'll call them young men. And he's just such a wonderful, amazing example, a saint. So I'm hoping that you guys will support that. We got to support each other in the work, right? In the work of evangelization. Somebody mentioned that I had a book. I'm not selling any books here because FedEx didn't get them here in time. So Luke is now the proud owner of 100 books. And he'll be getting an invoice shortly. But I'd just like to start with the dedication of my book, if that's okay with you. This book is dedicated to the women who have impacted my life and, in fact, saved my life. To our Blessed Mother Mary, for your continued intercession on my behalf, for the love and mercy you have always shown me. To Saint Mother Theresa, for your yes to our Lord and to the poor and forgotten. Your kindness and mercy changed everything for me. To Mother Elvira of Comunidad Chanacalo, for your sacrifice, your service, and your joy. You have been a reflection of God's love and mercy for me and my family, as well as thousands of other families you have touched. To my mother, Alma, who suffered greatly as a result of my addiction, thank you for never giving up on me and for your endless prayers. To my wife, Benerata, my partner and my best friend, your love and support have meant the world to me. our Lord picked you to walk on this journey with me, and you have made me a better man. You're the love of my life. Thank you for everything you have done for me and for our family. And to my daughter, Kyra, thank you for being the amazing woman of God that you are. You're in my prayers always. Now, if I was to write this dedication today, I would add, thank you, Kyra, for my first and only grandson, Cruz, who was born on my birthday. He came 2 weeks early to be there for my birthday. Yeah, not bad, right? And so this is my first talk since he was born. So instead of me talking, what we're going to do is we're going to do a slideshow of pictures of Cruz. He's 2 months old. So, as I said, I do this a little bit. I go around and I share my testimony, and it's my life. So I know the story, right? But it's never the same. When I share my testimony, it's never the same. I'm always interested to see what the Holy Spirit has in store, not only for you, but for me. And one thing that struck me as I hung around here this weekend was all these young men, these really young men. And it brings me back to my own childhood. So my family some of the people in my family are kind of famous. People kind of know a little bit about my family. And one of the rumors is that we're this Catholic family that grew up in Boston. And so I want to dispel a couple of things real quickly. Growing up in my family in Boston, we were culturally Catholic, okay? That means we did what the neighbors did. When it was time to make your first Holy Communion, you did it because everybody your age did it, right? I never went to church with my parents. I never heard my father invoke the name of the Lord. The only thing I knew about God was that he was going to get me, and I was in a lot of trouble for the things that I was doing. And it's such a terrible thing to do to a child. It really is. It's rotten. On Sunday mornings, my parents' way of getting some rest was to send everybody that was old enough to Mass, right? Not bring us to Mass, send us to Mass, or at least point us in that general direction. None of us ever ended up in Mass, I can tell you that. And what we would do is we'd go out of the house. It'd be about 6 of us that were old enough to walk down the 1.5 miles, 2 miles to St. Gregory's. We'd go in 6 different directions. We'd all go in, grab a bulletin, head over to Walsh Park, where the cops would play softball every Sunday morning. We'd watch the cops play softball, and then we would go home and say, yeah, we went to Mass. And the few times that I did go to Mass, I can tell you that even as a young boy, I just felt like I was the biggest sinner. I just couldn't figure it out. I just felt like everybody was looking at me. Everybody was thinking about me. I thought I was that important, right? That people were in church looking at me. I didn't realize, obviously, at that age that everybody there had their own things going on. But I never felt at home. I never felt welcome. I never felt the love of God. Again, all I heard growing up was that God was going to get you. I think it's important to share with you, there were some other environmental factors going on in my life. I went to the Boston public school system during the forced integration of the Boston public school system, and what that meant to me was some judge decided that they were going to take all the poor black kids from that neighborhood and send them to the schools in the poor white kids' neighborhoods, and they were going to send us to their schools. And nobody ever fixed the schools. They just sent us to each other's neighborhoods and took us out of our comfort zone. And every year, from grade 1 to grade 7, I went to a different school. So every year I was the new kid. So certainly a contributing factor to my insecurities and my low self-esteem. I'm also the middle child of 9. I'm sure that means something. I've always heard that. I was always, as far back as I can go, I was always in trouble. I was always into something. I was always sort of drawn to the streets, if you will. I was always looking for love in all the wrong places, And so I make it to the 7th grade. Got in a lot of trouble between the 1st grade and the 7th grade. I finished the 7th grade. I was going to the Martin Luther King School in Roxbury, Massachusetts, and last day of school, heading to the bus. Principal says, "Hey, Jim," because the principal in every school I ever went to knew my name. He said, "Hey, Jim," or Jimmy, or whatever he called me. He said, "I hope you enjoyed your time here with us, but you won't be coming back here next year." And I went home, and dinner in my house was 5 p.m. If you weren't home at 5 p.m., you didn't get dinner, okay? But it was a family dinner. We all sat down together, and we were fighting for scraps, we were poor. And I can remember, like it was yesterday, being at that dinner table, and I had my eye on the back door, because it was Friday. It was the last day of school, and I was going out. I was 12 years old. Is anybody in there 12 years old? You're a big 12. I need a little 12. Who's a small 12? I mean, I was so small, and I weighed 20 pounds soaking wet. I was just a little kid. And I got my eye on the back door because I know that all my friends are going to be out there, and we're going to party tonight. This is what I'm thinking about at 12 years old. And I wolfed down my dinner, and I started heading out the back door, and my dad stopped me. And he said, "Now, you remember, boy, when those street lights come on, you better be in this house or don't bother coming home." Now, that sounds a little brutal to say to a 12-year-old, but believe me, he had cause to give me that warning because I had been in plenty of trouble by then. And I went out, and I was at the Lean School in Dorchester on Bailey Street with all my little buddies, and the music was playing, and it was disco, and I mean, everything was just so great. And then I looked up and I saw the street lights start to flicker. And I looked at the beer in one hand and the cigarette in the other at 12 years old. And I said, I ain't gonna make it. And I didn't make it. And I didn't go home again until August. And that summer, my life completely spiraled out of control at 12 years old. By the end of that summer, I was awarded the state. That means the state was in charge of making all the decisions that related to my life. I started, I was getting arrested. I was in and out of juvenile detention. I was in and out of foster care, group homes, shelters for kids, you name it. Once the spiral started, I couldn't do anything. I didn't have a loving God to turn to because I was petrified of God because I had been warned all my life that God's going to get me for all the things I was doing. And alcohol and drugs did a real good job of helping me to forget about that. And then I would come to and I'd have to start all over again because of that fear. I'm moving quick today because they told me I had a shorter amount of time. By the time I was 17, I got arrested for an armed robbery. Now, while in juvenile detention, I picked up a nickname. My nickname was Jimmy Walpole instead of Wahlberg. Walpole was the name of the maximum security state prison in Massachusetts. Somebody thought it was funny. Somebody thought they rhymed, whatever it was. Certainly, many people thought that's where I was heading. I was 17, maybe 5-10 minutes, and I got arrested for an armed robbery, and I went to court. And the judge was talking about sending me to state prison. Eventually, that's exactly what happened. Before I turned 18, I got my first state prison sentence. I got a 3 to 5 year sentence. And I remember when I got to the prison, I sat down with a social worker or a caseworker, or I don't know what her title was, but she went through how if I was a good guy and if I just behaved myself and kept a low profile, that I could be out in 2 years, I could get my life back on track, I could be rehabilitated, and everything would be great. And it just, nothing ever seemed to work out the way it was, the easy way. You lay out the easy way for me, that's the last way I'm going, right? And the problem was, I think, for me as it relates to trying to take the easy way in this particular situation is that I was, 110 pounds soaking wet. I was petrified, and my biggest fear was what you thought of me, not what I thought of me, right? What you thought of me. So I lived my life to please you, right? So that you would think that I was a tough guy, that I was crazy. Crazy used to be a compliment, right? In my neighborhood, that was a compliment. And so I got right into all of the drama in prison. I ended up turning that 2 years into 5 years. Yeah, I did about 4 years locked in the hole because of my behavior. And I remember I was in the hole. The hole consists of, it's prison within prison is the best way I can explain it, okay? So the cell is smaller, there's double doors, there's no human contact, there's a very limited amount of time where you're coming out of that cell. It's about 1 hour a day, and when you come out, you are in a dog kennel, walking back and forth in your shackles. And one day a guard came to my cell and said, I hadn't talked to another human being in quite a while, and he said, hey, you have a visitor. I said, I think you got the wrong cell, buddy. I haven't had a visitor since I've been in prison, never mind since I've been down here in the hole. And he said, no, you have a visitor. And they chained me up with my waist chains and my leg chains, and they brought me out to the visiting room, and my mom was sitting there. Yeah, and I was basically an animal at this point. I was, every other word out of my mouth began with an F. And I had, I was deprived of sunlight. I was mentally in really bad shape. And I went out and I sat with her, and she would tell me years later that she stayed for maybe 5 minutes. She ran out of that prison and out into the parking lot, got in her car, and just wept like a baby. And really didn't recognize me as her own child. She couldn't figure out what happened. What happened to my son? About another year goes by. I'm now in for 5 years. They come to my cell, same guard, and he says, hey, got good news for you. You've been in for 5 years. You're all done. This was a Friday afternoon. He said, on Monday, you're getting out. Now, I did my best to sound excited, and then I whispered in a much lower voice, are you sure? Because by my calculations, I got about another 6 months. I didn't want to get out. I didn't have anywhere to go. I didn't have a plan. The thought of being out in the world was such a foreign thought to me at this point. I was more scared of being out there than I was it being a maximum security state prison. I knew prison. I understood prison. I knew how to behave. I knew what I could do, what I couldn't do, what I could get away with, and what I couldn't get away with. And so I asked if I could use the phone, and I called my older brother, and I said, hey, buddy, what's up? And I, again, tried to sound as excited as I could. Hey, guess what? Good news, I'm getting out. But I don't really have anywhere to go. Any chance you could put me up for a little while till I get on my feet? And he said, he tried to sound excited too, by the way. He was not very excited. He said, sure. I just gave notice. I'm moving out of my apartment in 1 month. So you have 1 month to get on your feet. You can stay on the couch. And he came and picked me up on that Monday afternoon. He took me to see my mom. Again, years later, my mother would tell me that she knew within 5 seconds I was going back to prison. She just didn't want me to take any of my siblings with me, and she didn't want me to bring any of that drama to her front door. So she really just wanted me to leave, just go away. And man, that month came and went so fast. It really did. I don't think I ever looked for a job. I know that I picked up a drink that first day, and I know that I was completely intoxicated. Anytime that I was awake, I was intoxicated. And so the month came, the moving truck was in front of the house. My brother said, hey, what are you going to do, buddy? We're out of here. And he's packing, putting his stuff in the car, in the truck. And I said, oh, yeah, don't worry. I'm going to run up to the store and come back. I got a place. I'm all set. And I left, and I went out the door, and I drank. And I stumbled back the next day, and all of my belongings were on the front porch. The landlord had packed my few belongings into what we like to call Irish luggage, big green trash bags. And he left them on the front stairs. And after doing 5 years in prison, just 1 month later, I was homeless again and fully addicted to alcohol. And, it was it's a sad, lonely place to be. And I just got comfortable in it right away, And I was fortunate. I found an old girlfriend who was living in the housing projects who said I could come and stay with her. And right away, I started running around with a guy. This guy was shooting. I feel really nervous about my entire testimony in front of some of these young kids, but he was sticking needles in his arms, is all I'm going to say, right? There was a lot of stuff in those needles that he needed just to feel regular in the morning. And so in the morning, I woke up and I needed a drink. I was shaking. And he woke up and it was like he was possessed. And so he would steal anything that he could get his hands on to get us both off E. And, it's funny. I like the analogy that we were both on the Titanic, but he was sitting over there and I was sitting over there. And for some reason, his seat looked like a better seat than mine, even though we were all going to the bottom of the ocean. Because I didn't know what his pain was. I only knew what my pain was. And my pain was the worst possible pain because it was mine. I had to feel it. I couldn't feel his pain. And so I said to him, Billy, I want to try that. And he said, you sure about that? I mean, you really don't understand what's happening here, do you? And I was like, yeah, no, I want to try it. I think I'm ready. And he said, all right. And he kind of blew me off. And that night, God intervened on my behalf, and I was arrested. And I was arrested in a complete blackout for robbing a Boston police officer's home. Yeah, real genius I was. I was just stumbling around drunk in a blackout in South Boston, checking car doors, checking apartment doors, just completely in a shambles. And I turned the doorknob and the door opened on a first floor apartment. And I walked in and nobody was home. And it was 3 o'clock in the morning. I start collecting some of their belongings and put it in by the back door for my great escape. And, like the VCR. And I'll explain to the kids later what a VCR is. But I put all the stuff by the door. And then I just kind of forgot where I was and what I was doing. And I thought maybe there's a beer in the fridge. And I opened the fridge, and there was a six-pack. So I grabbed a beer and popped it open, sat down at the kitchen table, possibly put my feet up on the table, just kind of forgot where I was. Yeah, and the next thing I remember, I woke up in the police station, and I was covered with blood, and I was petrified because I was a very dangerous alcoholic, and I didn't realize what had happened. I thought I might have hurt somebody. Come to find out that the blood was my blood, that the police officer came home in the middle of the night for a cup of coffee, him and his partner, found me at the kitchen table, and they did what I think most men would do in that circumstance. And so I went to court. It was 6 months later since I walked out of that maximum security state prison after 5 years, and I was back in court. And the district attorney was talking about a life sentence for house invasion because that's what that crime carries in the state of Massachusetts. And it was the cop that actually spoke up on my behalf. He said, a life sentence. He said, look at the kid, he's a mess. Why don't you get him some help? He was satisfied with the neighborhood justice that I got, right? He was good enough. Maybe 6 months, but he was good. And ultimately, I got a brand new 6 to 9 year sentence. 6 to 9 years. Yeah, the same noise I made. And I took that 6 to 9 years and walked back into the prison that I had just walked out of. And the only thing I knew is I couldn't do 9 years. I started doing the math. I said, if I do 9 years, I'm going to be older than 30 when I get out of here, and that's prehistoric, right? I can't get out of here when I'm 30. And so I started doing things to run game, to create an illusion. I said, I got to fool these people into thinking I am somebody else because I can't do 9 years. And so I started doing things to create an illusion that I was trying to become rehabilitated. I started going to different self-help groups, 12-step meetings, therapy, anything I could get my hands on. And then I couldn't just go to the groups. Then I had to be in charge of the groups. So I was the guy setting up the room, making the coffee, signing the attendance sheet. It's comical, right? So I'm in charge now, right? And I'm not fooling anybody, right? I'm certainly not fooling myself. I can remember being in those groups, right, and thinking, what a wonderful thing this is. But this is never going to work for me because I'm not worthy of this. That's the way I felt in my heart. I never felt worthy of any kind of good things happening to me or for me. Apparently, the only person I fooled was the Catholic priest, Father Jim Wahlberg, the greatest man I've ever met in my life. Father approached me in the yard at the maximum security prison, and he said, "You're Jim Wahlberg, huh?" And I said, "Yes, I am, Father." And he said, "Man, I hear good things about you. I hear you're really trying to get your life together. I have a job opening in the chapel. Do you have any interest in that?" And I started thinking about, well, first, he smoked cigarettes, so I'm going to get some cigarettes, right? Right away, I'm thinking about how this situation is going to benefit me. I'm not thinking about, I'm going to get to the foot of the cross. I'm going to go to Mass. I'm not thinking about anything except manipulating this poor guy, because clearly he's not that bright, right? Yeah. And so I take the job. 2 days in, I say, "Hey, Father, listen. I got a brother. He's apparently in some singing group. And they're starting to get really popular. Apparently, they're selling their cassette tape at Tower Records. Kids, I'll explain about the cassette tapes and the Tower Records also later. But I said, Father, I've been a terrible big brother. I really love to be supportive to my little brother. I said, any chance you could bring me a cassette tape? And he didn't hesitate. He said, absolutely. And the next day, Father Jim Wahlberg broke the law and smuggled in a cassette tape to me. And you would think that I might be grateful for that. But instead, I'm thinking, what am I going to have him smuggle next, right? Because that's the way my mind worked. I wasn't much, but I was all I seemed to think about, right? And so a week or two goes by, Father says to me, hey, listen, I really need this chapel clean for Sunday Mass. So why don't you come on Saturday evening when in prison, everything happens on a clock. All the cells open, people go to the next place they're going in the prison, all the doors close. And he said, you come out at the 7 o'clock movement and come and you can clean then, so it'll be clean for Sunday Mass. He didn't mention that there was a vigil Mass at 7 o'clock, right? So now I'm there and I'm in Mass, right? And I don't know what's going on. I know that I feel the same way I did when I was a little kid. I felt like I didn't belong there. I felt like I was the worst sinner. But now I was in a prison, maximum security state prison, and now I think I'm the worst sinner, right? And I had no idea what was going on. I didn't know when to stand, when to kneel. I didn't know the responses. I didn't know anything about what was going on in Mass. And the only example I had was my friend Mike. Mike was a professional bank robber. Came from generations of bank robbers from a little place called Charlestown, Massachusetts. And that's what they do. They're either bank robbers, they're murderers, they're very dangerous, and they lived by a code of silence. And but he was very Catholic. That was just his career choice as far as he was concerned, right? He was a very Catholic guy. So he knew when to stand, he knew when to kneel, he knew the responses, and so I just did what he did, right? And so now I'm back in Mass. I don't know, maybe it might not have been a week, 2 weeks, but Father comes to me and he's so excited. Because most days it's just me and him there in the chapel. Jim, I got big news. Really, Father, what's the big news? And I'm trying to act excited, right? And he says, Mother Theresa is coming to this prison. And I said, really, Father? That's amazing. Who's Mother Teresa? And, you know, the way I found out, I probably didn't know who the president was either, to be honest with you. I was really damaged. The way I found out how important this occasion was, I called my mother, collect. Every call was collect. Collect from Jim. Hey, Mom, hey, I got some news for you. What's up? I said, oh, Mother Teresa's coming to the prison. And she was like, what? And she was all excited. And then I heard her yelling to her mother, who always lived with us. Now, my grandmother, Leone, was about this big, with 9 kids in my family. And she lived with us in the basement. As far as she was concerned, there was only 1 kid in our family. My sister, my little sister, was the princess, and the rest of us, she had no time for. She didn't like any of us. And so my sister got to eat the Entenmann's and sit in the lazy boy down in her apartment and watch her stories with her. And my mother said to her, hey, Ma, Mother Teresa's going to Jim's prison. And this woman got excited. It was the first thing I ever said in my entire life that ever excited this woman. And she was like, oh, get me a rosary, and so I said, this must be a big deal, because this lady hasn't spoken to me in 20 years. And so I did a little research, and again, the word important keeps coming back to me, right? That I realized that it was an important event that was happening. Not a holy event, not a religious event, not a future saint coming, like none of that, because I had no understanding of what any of that meant. But the day came, and Mother came walking into the prison. And prison, to give you a picture, is almost like a college campus, except it has a big, giant wall with like razor wire and lots of fences and alarms and guards. It's the only difference, right? And so I'm walking through the quad area in this prison, and out of the corner of my eye, I see the front door open, right? That's where people come in. And of course, when that door opens, all eyes are on the door. And I look and I see people coming through the door, suits on. And I said, oh, these guys look important. And as they got a little bit closer, I could make out it was the governor and the warden and the commissioner of the Department of Corrections and some other people. And then they parted a little bit, and there she was. There was Mother and a couple of the sisters from her order. And as they got closer, I noticed a few things about her. The first thing I noticed about her was her feet, because my head was always kind of down, I wasn't a man with any kind of pride or dignity or self-esteem. I didn't look people in the eye. I had a tendency of looking down. And I looked down at her feet, and I see her toes all crunched up, and her sandals looked like they were 200 years old. And I came up a little bit, and I noticed her sweater and had moth holes in it. She had little pockets right here. And I looked a little closer. Something was sticking out of the pockets. It was money. And I confess to you that I spent a little more time than I should have looking at that money. But there was no money in prison, and so I was a little confused by it. Ultimately, they all walked by us. I didn't speak to her. We didn't make eye contact, nothing. I ran back to the chapel. Father, she's here. Oh, that's awesome. Hey, I got more great news for you. I said, really? More great news, Father? He said, because you work in the chapel, you'll be part of the procession. And I said, that's awesome. What's a procession? And he said, oh, you're going to come in with all the important people. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And so I did just that. I processed in with the cardinal, with the priests, with a bunch of nuns, Mother. And again, it was such an important occasion. And as we processed in the gymnasium in this prison, the stage was about this high and it served as the altar. And the cardinal had his own fancy chair brought in. It's very impressive. And, he had his big hat and his big stick, and it was this big. It was big, right? And here's this little Mother just like, walking in. And right away, I was stumped. The cardinal goes up. He gets up onto the altar, and he's standing in front of his chair, and he's beckoning Mother to come and sit. And she refused. She's, no. And she put her hands in a praying motion on her head, and she backed up, and she got on her knees about 3 or 4 rows back with all the inmates and just stayed there. She refused to go up. And I was so confused. I was like, this is all about her. Why is she not going up there? This is her moment to shine. This is all for her. And of course, we know I know now that it was never about her. It was always about Jesus, right? But she stayed there on the floor, and there was a moment when I looked over, and I was on my knees as well, and I felt as though I was looking at the face of God, like because I had no understanding, and then the time came for her to come up and to speak, and what she said, the words that she said, changed everything for me. It was the first time in my life that somebody told me that Jesus Christ died for me, right? And that I was more than the crimes that I committed, that I was a child of God, that I had a Father in heaven. I never heard anything like that, and it was very, very confusing. Can't tell you what happened for the rest of the day. I remember going back to my cell. I remember not sleeping very much. I remember pacing, tossing and turning, being confused. The next morning, that door opened, and I ran back to that chapel to Father Freitas. And I said, Father, I need to know more about this Jesus that she's talking about, this Jesus that loves me. And, the memory's a funny thing. Father, the way I remember it, kind of chuckled a little bit, took an imaginary pencil out of his pocket and went up and made a little check mark and said, got one, right? That's the way I remember it, right? Yeah. The name of my book is The Big Hustle, right? And it gives you the indication that somehow I'm the big hustler. No, Father James Freitas is the big hustler. Father James Freitas is hustling for the Lord, right? So there ain't nothing he won't do to get you to the foot of that cross. And Father said, come, sit down with me. I want to talk to you for a little while. In that moment, he started to catechize me. He started to prepare me to make my confirmation. The words were never spoke, and he didn't take down the catechism of the Catholic Church and blow the dust off it and throw it on the table with a big thump and open up to page 970,000 and say, then there was light. He just lovingly started to teach me our faith in the most gentle and simple way. The only way that I was ever going to sink into my head. The only way it was ever going to not make me run out of the room. If there was going to be homework, there was going to be a problem, right? If I had to read books at that moment, I'm not sure I could read at that moment. I was really damaged. This says I got 2 minutes. That ain't happening. It's not happening. So when Luke, I love you, man. Luke, I'm going to tell you something. Last night I came here, none of this was done yet. Like, none of this was done yet. These are real soldiers here. These are real soldiers here doing the work, right? Doing the work, yeah. So Luke's brother, Brian, Joe, I'm terrible with names. I don't even know my own name half the time. Joe's married to a friend of mine's wife's sister. Yeah? Yeah. Your brother is. You got another brother. Hold on. Never mind. Cancel that whole story. But Luke tracked me down through a mutual friend. And he said, hey, you want to come out and we'd love to. And I said, yeah, sure. Talk to my daughter. She's in charge. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know where I am or what's going on. But I got here, and like I said, I was praying that they canceled the flight, but apparently they don't cancel flights in Denver for snow. That's a non-thing here. Right? That snow is not an issue. In Florida, they cancel a flight if a leaf falls off a tree. But when Luke called and he said, oh yeah, I just need a title for the talk, for his talk. And I'm like, a title for the talk? Like, what are you talking about, a title? Hey, so I just like, yeah, iron sharpens iron, That's the title of the talk. Clearly, you haven't heard any iron sharpening any irons up until this point, but we're not done yet. So I have this major conversion, and a few months go by, Father's catechizing me. They tell me I'm being transferred to another prison. So the first person that I need to inform is Father. So I run back, Father, I'm being moved to another prison. He says, where are you going? I said, I told him where I was going. He said, have a seat. He called the next prison. And he said, can I speak to Father Michael, please? And Father Michael got on the phone, and he said, Father Michael, I have a special delivery FedEx package coming to you. His name is Jim Wahlberg, and this is where we are on the journey. And I walked into that other prison, and Father was waiting for me. And I was there for a few months, and we continued on the journey of me learning my faith. And because I was being a good boy, they said, we're going to transfer you again to a minimum security prison. And I went, I told Father, and he said, have a seat. And he called the next prison, and he said, Father Larry, special delivery FedEx package coming for you. His name is Jim Wahlberg, and this is where we are in the process. And I got to the next prison, and it was a minimum security place. There was no bars and no walls and no fences. It was very strange. It was like a summer camp for grown-ups. You know, that's what it was. Got a little lake. People were fishing, I think. It was nice. And but the time came, and Father said, you are ready to be confirmed into the Catholic Church. And he said, we are going to have a ceremony, and because we're in minimum security, you can have a little party if you like. We'll make you a cake. You can invite some of your friends. You can even invite your family if you like. And I said, really? Okay. And I called my mother. And I said, Mom, big news. I'm making my confirmation, and it's going to happen in 2 weeks. And I'm told I can invite you and anyone from the family that wants to come. And would you come? And she, I don't know. Let me think about it, right? Because she went right back to that last time that she visited me in prison. And I called her back 2 days later, and I heard the reluctance in her voice, but she agreed to come. Now, brothers, I want to tell you that I had no idea that it would become the most important day of my life, not just because I was confirmed into the faith, right? That's pretty big, right? But it became the most important day in my life as it relates to my mother and our relationship. For the rest of my life, my mother would go back to that day, and she would say, Jimmy, oh, Jimmy, do you remember that day? She loved to take credit for everything, right? Do you remember that day when I knew you were going to be okay? Do you remember that day? In fact, 6 months after that day, I went to the parole board. And, they had my file. It was big, man. It was big. I was a bad seed. And, they're sitting there, and I'm telling them, God bless you, easy does it, keep it simple. I'm all better now. You can send me home. And the guy kind of laughed, and he had my file. And he was like, yeah. He goes, we have one letter here that we're going to read. And he opened up the letter, and it was from my mother. Now, so you understand who my mother was as a mom, my brother Bob got arrested. He loves when I tell this story. My brother Bob got arrested, him and all his friends. They went up to Dorchester Court. They're all lined up, and behind them, their mothers are standing there. And the judge one at a time, asked the mothers about their sons. And one at a time, every one of them lied. Oh, my son Sean is a fine boy. He helps old ladies across the street. He never comes home late. This is an isolated incident right down the line. They got to my mother, and my mother said, he's a rotten kid. Lock him up. He hasn't been home in 2 weeks. He's drinking alcohol. He's fighting in the streets. He's trouble, and he's going to hurt somebody. That's who my mother was, right? She would not lie for her children. And so the parole chairman opens up the letter, and he starts to read it. And the letter basically says, before you stands a man of God. It's okay. You can let him go. He ain't coming back. And that was it. And the guy laughed. He patted the folders. He said, yeah, whatever. You haven't gotten any trouble since you've been here this time. We're going to let you go, but we'll see you when you get back. Yeah, it seems like a rotten thing to say, but I want to say that in my heart of hearts, I thought I'd probably be back as well, right? Because I didn't know any other way. I was going to take this, what I had now, and bring it out into the world. I couldn't process that. I get out, and I'm going to the meetings, and I'm not drinking, and I got a job, and I'm going to church, and the scandal is really, in the church, is really like full bloom, and it's in Boston, ground zero. And I'm going to the meetings, and the people in the meetings are telling me, oh, you don't have to go there. You can create your own conception of God. You just have to believe in a higher power. You don't have to believe in Jesus Christ and the Catholic Church and all that. And I was like, oh, really? Yeah, okay. Leave it up to me, an idiot. I just told you who I was, right? Homeless, in and out of prison, drunk. Leave it up to me to create my own conception of God. So my conception of God was basically he was a pool hustler, and I didn't need the sacraments. I just would say, hey, sorry, guy, I'll do better next time, and I'd keep going. And I drifted away from the faith again. And the Lord only knows how I didn't pick up a drink or a drug. But that emptiness, it crept back into my heart. That loneliness crept back into my heart. And that fear of God, of how I am turning my back on him after everything that I had been through, and how he saved me from that, and delivered, his number one assistant on earth to my doorstep to bring me the good news that God loved me. And so I was really I had a lot of guilt and a lot of shame, and I was empty again. But except now I was married, I was having kids. And so, I was trying to wear this mask and trying to fake like I was a happy guy and that I was a good guy. And, there were a lot of things about me that some might say are good things. I was a man of service. I was a man of action. I was a man out there in the streets helping homeless people and working at the homeless shelter and doing all those things. But I was doing it all. It was me. It wasn't the Lord. I wasn't being guided. I wasn't being directed. I was just faking it. I just wanted you to like me, to say what a great guy Jim is. Look at how good Jim's doing. Look at the fancy car he's got. Look at the gold chain. Look at our beautiful wife and the nice house. And I was empty. My wife had a conversion. I was more than empty. I was empty, and I was angry. I was driving my wife and children to church and dropping them off and going home and then coming back and picking them up, okay? So that's more than empty. That's angry, right? And my wife went on a retreat and had a major conversion and came home. And, for the guys in the room that are married, you kind of know how this works, right? Your wife gets into something, you got 3 days to get on board, right? Or you're going in the doghouse, and there you will stay until you get on board. She didn't do that this time. She came home, and she was more loving, more kind, more gentle, more forgiving. And it was attractive. But it wasn't attractive enough for me to say, oh, I'll do the same, right? So months go by. There's a men's retreat coming up, and she started to, hey, buddy, there's this retreat coming up. Maybe you could go. Maybe you'd like it. Maybe, yeah, I'm good. No, thank you. And her best friend, who also went on that retreat with her, started working her husband. And so he and I had a union meeting out back behind the house. Brother, don't break the union line. We ain't going. This is for them. This is for the ladies. We are the providers, right? And every 6 months, the retreat would happen. And every 6 months, every 5 months, I'd start to get the messages. Hey, maybe you should go, leave the application, and I'm good. And then my wife sent the secret weapon to have a talk with me. She sent my 12-year-old daughter, Kyra, to talk to me about the retreat. And my 12-year-old daughter, Kyra, said to me, Daddy, I would really like it if you would go on the retreat. I want you to be happy. I want you to know Jesus. And I was crushed. And it was like I could feel, I was like, you want me to be happy? I was like Mr. Jocularity, right? I was so all jokes all the time. But she knew, she could see right through it. She knew I was not happy, and she knew that she was missing out on a happy dad and a godly man. And so I couldn't say no. So I said, yes, of course I will go. And, they all started celebrating. And I went right into my mind of, I did 10 years in prison. I can do 2 days with these idiots. I'll be fine, right? That's what I was thinking about. I was not going here to have a conversion experience. I was not doing any of that. I was just going to get the heat off, right? To keep my spot in the big bed, to make my little girl happy, right? And so I went, and right away I get there, and my brothers, well, they still laugh about it. I showed up to the retreat house. I pull up, and they're like, hey, brother, how you doing? Hey, everybody's smiling. Let me get your luggage, right? I'm like, dude, don't touch my bag. Just relax. Just relax, right? And they're all hugging and shaking hands, and they're so happy. I got a hooded sweatshirt on. I got the hood on, right? And I'm just like, I put my stuff in my own room. Then they were like, oh, we got to have your cell phone. And I was like, you got to have what? They were like, yeah, we're collecting the cell phones. And I just kept going back to, I can't not do this because I can't do this to my daughter. I can't go home and say I couldn't make it through the weekend, right? It would be terrible. And I'd be out of the big bed, and I'd be, all bad things would happen to me. And that's all I was ever thinking about was me. And so, I went, and I just sat there, kind of like this guy sitting here, but he's happy, and I wasn't. And, I can remember, so I had lots of experience from going to 12-step meetings and things like that. I had lots of experience hearing people tell their stories, right? And open up about the ugliness of their lives and what it used to be and what it's like now. So I had experience with that, so it wasn't foreign to me, but it was really uncomfortable. And I was hearing voices. The voice I was hearing was in my own voice, dude, you don't belong here. This is weird, right? And but little by slow, as the weekend progressed, and as they took us through the process of this retreat, I started to feel the ice melt a little bit, just a little bit. And we got about halfway through, and there was an exercise that we did, and I started crying. Like boogie crying, like nasty, sloppy crying. And we were doing an exercise where we close our eyes, and they were walking us. They walked me into a room, and they said, okay, open your eyes. And I opened my eyes, and there was a priest sitting there waiting to hear my confession. Yeah. And I just wept. I just wept like a baby. And I was so, before my first conversion, I had all the excuses in the world because nobody told me that Jesus died for me. Nobody told me that God loved me, that I was a child of God. Nobody told me that. Nobody told me that I had a Father in heaven that would care for me and love me. Nobody told me any of those things. So I had legit excuses up until that conversion. But after that, I had nothing. God revealed himself to me in a major, major way, and I turned my back on him. And so I'm there, and I'm weeping, and the priest is like, son, just the facts, please. Like, we got 35 people out here, just, and I walked out of there. I cried myself to sleep. The next day, we had mass and a ceremony, and our family members came, and my face was red, and my wife thought I was mad, but it was all the crying, right? Like, my nose was like, those men on that retreat remind me a lot of the men that I've met here this weekend. Men like Luke, who they have one mission, man, is to get you to the foot of the cross, right? They keep talking about the small groups. They're so much fun, right? They're getting us to the foot of the cross, and whatever we got to do to make sure that we stay there, and that, especially, I'm impressed with the size of this room, but I'm not very impressed with Colorado overall. And brother, there ain't a state in the union that needs men like you more than this state, all right? Yeah. Clock broke, so I have no idea how long we went or any of that. Brothers, you got something special here. Like, I do this. I go all over the country. This is impressive. This is real. When I saw that video of all the activities that you guys have done over the years, and I saw a lot of faces that I see here today, this is an army of men that can lead many to the foot of the cross. And most impressive to me is all the young men in the room, in the examples that you are for them. It's beautiful. God bless you all. Thank you.